The American experiment began, not with blood and bullets, but with the stroke of a pen, with a document that defied an empire and gave voice to a nation. This is the story of the Declaration of Independence. Long before the fateful summer of 1776, discontent had been brewing in the American colonies. Many colonists immigrated to the New World to pursue opportunity and economic prosperity. However, by the end of the 7 Years' War in 1763, the British Empire had accumulated an enormous debt, and somebody had to pay it. For Britain, that somebody was the American colonists. Naturally, the freedom-minded colonists chafed under a crown that levied taxes such as the Stamp Act and Townshend Act, yet denied representation in Parliament. So became the infamous rallying cry among protesters: no taxation without representation. Tensions further escalated with events like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party, each becoming symbols of colonial resistance and sowing the seeds of a radical new idea: independence. Militarized armed conflict with Great Britain officially began with the Battle of Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775. But even then, many colonists still doubted if separation was the right choice at all. Support for independence grew over the following year, with Thomas Paine's pro-revolution pamphlet Common Sense playing a big role in the shifting sentiment.
Men who look upon themselves born to reign and others to obey soon grow insolent. Selected from the rest of mankind, their minds are early poisoned by importance, and the world they act in differs so materially from the world at large that they have but little opportunity of knowing its true interests. And when they succeed to the government, are frequently the most ignorant and unfit of any throughout the dominions.
On May 15, 1776, the colony of Virginia formally dissolved relations with King George. Then, on June 7th, at a meeting of the Second Continental Congress, Virginia statesman Richard Henry Lee proposed that all the colonies collectively dissolve ties with Britain as well. The Lee Resolution, as it was known, was met with a mix of enthusiasm and caution. Such a motion had dire political consequences, after all. Ultimately, some delegates weren't authorized to take such drastic action then and there, and needed to gauge popular support back home. So, the Congress postponed their decision. However, in the meantime, they appointed the so-called Committee of Five to formalize the idea of independence in a written document justifying separation from Britain. This committee included the eccentric sage and scientist Benjamin Franklin, the morally steadfast lawyer John Adams, the pious Connecticut statesman Roger Sherman, rising public servant Robert Livingston, and the eloquent Virginia planter Thomas Jefferson. Over the following weeks, these 5 men collaborated on the document. However, it was Thomas Jefferson who was tasked with bringing it all together in a first draft. By his hand and the ink in his quill, Jefferson enshrined the highest ideals of the Enlightenment into timeless prose.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Words that would become the ideological bedrock of the United States. The document was composed of 3 distinct sections: a succinct appeal for individual rights, followed by a long list of grievances against the monarchy, and finally a formal declaration of independence from English rule. On June 28, 1776, the Committee of Five presented their work at the Pennsylvania State House, today known as Independence Hall. Further debates were had, and further ink was spilled, but by the end of the deliberation, a new independent nation had found its voice. The Second Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence on July 2, 1776, a moment which John Adams honored in a letter to his wife.
The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the Day of Deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. They ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore.
While Adams was quick to express his excitement about the document's approval, it actually took 2 more days to accommodate last-minute changes. Notably, 2 sections were removed from the final version of the Declaration we know today. The first was a passage suggesting punishment for the people of England. It was removed on diplomatic grounds, in the interest of maintaining relations with potential allies. The other removed excerpt was a grievance against England for bringing slavery to the colonies, indicating a portentous inner conflict that the new nation would take nearly a century to reconcile. The Declaration was signed by 56 delegates. The first to sign the historic document was the President of the Continental Congress, John Hancock. To this day, his name is synonymous with the very act of providing a signature. The Declaration of Independence was formally adopted the morning of July 4, 1776. On that day, bells rang out in Philadelphia, and the words sprinted through the colonies on horseback, carried across the frontiers and into the hearts of an embattled people. The Declaration of Independence was more than an assertion of freedom from Britain. It was a beacon of hope to all who yearned for justice and human dignity. The ideas enshrined in the Declaration are not just the story of American independence, but serve as a testament to the enduring human spirit, forever striving towards liberty and equality.